Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Giordano, and today I'm sitting down with Mark White, founder of Amazigh Overland. Mark is an expert on all things overlanding Morocco, and we're sitting down today for a masterclass full of tips on overlanding Morocco, including geography, the language, how to get to Morocco from Europe, temporary vehicle import permits, culture, what to do during Ramadan, and Mark shares his favorite campsites throughout the country. Thanks for joining. And we're recording this podcast from the field in Zagora, Morocco. And I'm here today with Mark White. He is an overland expert, dare I say, on Morocco. So welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks for having me take part.
Yeah, of course. Tell me a little bit about your background, because you wear many hats.
Yes, I do. So I'll start back at the beginning. I started coming to Morocco with a group of old friends 25 years ago now. The early days we'd fly in, rent an apartment, rent a car, explore the country, do all the main tourist sites. And I always said to people when we were driving and we saw those dirt tracks going over the mountains, one day I'm going to buy a suitable vehicle and go and see where that track goes. So 2011, got made redundant, so bought my first Land Cruiser, came out to do a trip. The idea was to do one trip and then sell the car when I got back home and go back to a normal life. But I kind of got hooked. So from then on, I was coming back every year, as I had been for a period of time, flying in and doing the normal tourist stuff, just on an annual holiday, 3 weeks each time, exploring more and more of the remote parts of the country, getting further away from the tourist trail and the guidebooks each time we came back. 2015, I ran a trip for the UK Land Cruiser Club, and we had 8 cars come, big group of people, interesting trip, and then started to think a bit more about doing more and more overlanding and spending more time. 2017, I left my job in civil engineering, decided that I didn't really want to go back to it and wanted to do something different, but didn't know what. And I was due to come out for 3 weeks holiday, decided to come out for 3 months, came out, had a lot of fun. Following year, got approached by a couple of guys from the Land Cruiser Club trip to run a route all the way down through the Western Sahara to the Tropic of Cancer and back again. So we came back out again, and another year of enjoying myself and spending money which I'd saved up over the years, which soon started to run out, leaving me with an option of trying to find a new way to generate an income and keep the wheels rolling. So I decided to set up an overland tour company specialising in Morocco, which we called Amazigh Overland, which ties into the name the indigenous people of North Africa give themselves, the Amazigh, which means free people. So I felt that was quite a good tie-in with overlanding and connected me to the region I was looking at specialising in. It was a bit of a slow start, as a lot of new businesses are. You're trying to break into a market which is established, nobody knows who you are, so the first couple of years were quite slow. 2019 or 2017, I helped Chris Scott update the latest edition, or the current edition, of the Morocco Overland Guidebook, did some of the route research, and then 2019 Chris got in touch with me about running as a support vehicle for a trip he's written about in the journal down into the Western Sahara. 2020, infamous year we all know so well. I arrived in Morocco beginning of March with a set of customers booked in, came in with some customers, and 4 days after we arrived in Morocco, they closed the borders as COVID took its grip on the world. I ended up trapped in Morocco for 4 months, had the most fantastic lockdown I think anybody had during those times, and then had a 2-year delay to getting back here while Morocco considered its response to COVID and reopening the borders, and there were various political issues which meant some of the ferries didn't run for a long time. And since things started back up to normal again, I've been back into running trips in Morocco over the last 18 months now, and just at the start of spring season for
2024. Awesome. So in addition to your tour business,
yes,
some other admin responsibilities.
So it doesn't just stop with running tours and showing people around the country. I do a lot of voluntary work, helping run several Facebook groups for West Africa, Morocco, North Africa. I've got one for the new Land Cruiser 250, and then we also run a SOS Overland group for Morocco and for Western Sahara, aiming to help people out who get into difficulty, maybe need recovery or mechanical assistance. So it's a volunteer network trying to help things. So that keeps me busy in between running tours.
Yeah.
When we came out September 2022, myself and a good friend of mine, Pete, who lives in Morocco with his Moroccan wife, we got chatting and we decided we were going to start organising an overlanding event in Morocco, just as a bit of fun initially, and trying to do something for the community while they were here in Morocco. And after some conversations over a couple of beers, we developed and rolled out Pizzas on the Piste, which is, as far as I know, it's a unique event in overlanding events. So the concept is part social gathering, part treasure hunt, and with the added advantage that we're making pizzas in the middle of nowhere. So we advertise the date. We do it mid-October each year, and we decided on that date because it's a good time for people starting a West Coast overland trip. So people are starting to head their way south at that time, so we can pick up people just in Morocco on holiday. We can pick up people who are just starting a longer term Africa trip. The first event was a great success, and a lot of the people who came were just starting West Africa trips. They met others who were going to be on the same route, and a lot of them stayed in touch and made good friendships through that event. The concept is we publish in advance the date, the rough location in Morocco, and we give people a few locations within maybe a 4-hour drive of the actual location. We take orders for pizzas in advance, and then 24 hours before the start of the event we publish GPS coordinates, and people have to come and find us, and not everybody does, unfortunately. And we do sometimes wonder, if you're planning a 6-month to a year overlanding trip and you can't find a GPS coordinate, maybe you need to do some more learning on navigation systems.
Yeah, that's a perfect opportunity to practice your navigation.
Last year we ran our second event, which was as well received as the earlier one. 30 odd pizzas cooked in the middle of the Sahara. We had 20 or something overland vehicles, everything from a Kia Picanto hire car up to a full 4x4 expedition truck, found where we were, and everybody sat down and had a laugh, and we cooked pizzas and took photos and swapped stories of adventures, and it's a great event. And the next one will be the 19th of October this year. Perfect.
So people can get an opportunity if they're, like you said, if they're down for a 2-week vacation, or if they're heading further into West Africa, or even as far as Cape Town. That's a perfect way to be in person, connecting with other people in the community that you might actually be running into multiple times.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference whether, when you're in person like that. It's a whole different feeling than on social media or in a Facebook group or something.
Yeah, I think you get a much better feel for people, and you form better friendships talking to people in person. And it's such a great fun event. It's really good fun to put on, and we're very grateful for everybody who comes along and makes it a success, because without the people who attend, the event is just me and Pete sat in the desert with a pile of pizza ingredients, and that soon gets boring.
So tell me, you're doing these trips, you're managing these Facebook groups, you're doing the pizzas on the piste. What brings you back to Morocco over and over and over again? Because you're talking to me earlier about how all of your overland experience almost is in Morocco, and you just keep coming back, and so that's why you're so specialist, which I think is so unique to be in one area like that. What brings you back every time?
It's just, there's so many things about Morocco. It's a country of huge contrasts, and as you arrive from Europe into the north of Morocco, you're in a very Mediterranean landscape, lots of greenery, lots of farming, quite an affluent, but every half a day driving in Morocco, the landscape changes, and it's completely different to the one you were in the day before. So the landscape is just breathtaking, and the mountain ranges, we've got 5 different mountain ranges here, all of which are unique in what they look like, the altitude, the plant life, the animal life. The climate is fantastic, particularly compared to the average UK weather. Being able to spend, on a good year, I get through to March, from March through to December, with sitting outside and enjoying outdoor life, nice temperatures, blue skies. The people of Morocco are just some of the most welcoming people I've ever met, and you'll get stopped in the middle of nowhere, invited in for a mint tea with some Berbers or some nomads. You'll get invited to go and have a meal with people, and they're just fantastic. And I've never experienced hospitality like the Moroccans do. And it's just a country which clicked with me on those early trips. And you see a lot of people, they come to Morocco, they do a traditional 2-week holiday to Morocco, or they come on an overlanding trip and they do a few weeks in Morocco, they go home and say, we've done Morocco, we've seen everything. Well, after 25 years, I still haven't seen everything. I'm still finding new things to discover, new areas I haven't been through, new tracks to explore, unexpected things out in the middle of nowhere, old Foreign Legion forts and prehistoric rock carvings, and all this history is so accessible, and it makes a day out on the track so much more enjoyable. When you come round a corner, there's a fort or something you didn't expect to be there, and I suppose it makes you feel a bit like a real explorer from days gone by when we didn't know much about the rest of the world. And it's just such a fascinating country. Every now and again, I have conversations with people like we did yesterday about other parts of the world, and most of my bucket list places to visit are North Africa. I don't have a big desire to do the west coast of Africa or the east coast, but Algeria, Mauritania, Mali. There's something that I guess I've fallen in love with deserts on a huge level, and there's just so much to explore.
True. And like you were saying, the landscape is so different, the scenery is so different. Can you give a bit of a breakdown on the geography of Morocco? Because there's like the high Atlas, the anti-Atlas, the north.
We'll start at the top and work our way down.
All right.
So, Morocco, it's 20 kilometres from Europe. It's very close to the southern tip of Spain and Gibraltar. It's got a Mediterranean coast and an Atlantic coast. The Mediterranean coast, the landscape is very similar to what you would see in Spain and southern France, Italy, Greece, etc., but with an Islamic twist to it. Just inland on the north coast of Morocco, you've got the Rif Mountains, quite heavily populated, lot of cultivation.
Lots of I was really surprised when we came in how like you said earlier, how green it is and how fertile the landscape is, and the rain that they get up there.
Yeah, and it's a part of the country which is better to explore in the summer months when the south is much hotter. It's got some interesting history along the Rif. The local tribes in the Rif have been notoriously difficult for the Moroccan government to control for centuries, and that has its own unique twists and interests. And as you move down south through the middle of Morocco, you come down past Meknes and Fez. Fez, home of one of the oldest medinas in the world, with the tanneries, which are interesting to visit if you can deal with the smell. And then you get into the Middle Atlas Mountains, which kind of run north-south between the Rif Mountains and the High Atlas, home to big cedar forests, quite green, rolling mountainside. We've got wild Barbary macaques in the mountains. There are wild boar, and again, a very different landscape to the Rif Mountains. Not quite so heavily populated, less farming, arable farming, and more sheep farming, herds of sheep and grazing, some forestry going on. And they split the country down the middle. To the west, the landscape, it's quite a flat area of Morocco. Lots of agriculture there, quite an affluent part of the country, all the way out to the coast around Casablanca, El Jadida, that area. Not such a good area for bits of interest and overlanding, in my opinion. It's not quite as exciting as the rest of the country. To the east of the Middle Atlas Mountains, you've got the Recon Plateau and Morocco's Empty Quarter, very sparsely populated, but an interesting area to explore because it's not visited by tourists. And over the years I've coming, tourist numbers in Morocco have increased dramatically, helped by EasyJet and Ryanair, of the budget airlines coming here. But the east of Morocco is still very rarely visited by tourists, so there's not much of a way of tourist infrastructure, so people don't go. So it's like being in Morocco 20 years ago, a much more genuine, unspoilt part of Morocco, and it's an area which has tucked away from the towns and the cities, out in the middle of nowhere, some fascinating historical items from the early part of last century. So as the French came into Morocco to establish the protectorate in the early 1900s, they came in from Algeria, so a lot of their initial footprint on Morocco was on the Far East side. So there's a whole string of old Foreign Legion forts out there. There's the remains of the old Trans-Sahara Railway, which the French were trying to build from the Mediterranean coast down to Timbuktu and beyond, in an attempt to take away trade from the camel caravans coming across. And there's this old colonial abandoned railway system out there in the middle of the desert, easily accessible by vehicle, fascinating places to explore. There's the sites of epic Foreign Legion battles where a small unit of 20-25 Foreign Legion soldiers fought off a cavalry army of 4,000 Berber warriors. There's a lot out there to hunt down and look for.
It did feel like we were out there a few weeks ago, and there's so many tracks, and it just felt like you could go down so many different tracks and explore.
Yeah.
And we saw, I think, one vehicle on those tracks the entire time we were there, maybe one or two, and a lot of more motorcyclists, but still it wasn't heavily traveled by tourists or overlanders in that area.
No, it's a part of Morocco more people should explore, and it's got so much for overlanders to look at, and enjoy out there and discover. And it's very easy to sit down and publish a list of GPS coordinates for all these interesting things. But again, I think there's a much greater sense of satisfaction stumbling across some of those things yourself, or being given a little bit of a hint or a pointer.
Yeah.
You know, go and have a look here, there's something which will interest you.
Yeah. Especially after the first visit. I feel like you have your first visit, you get your bearings a little bit, and then you have so much more confidence the next time to be like, let's go off of this road and do more exploring and drive around and see what we can find.
And I think a lot of overlanders who, from Europe particularly, who come out to Morocco, a lot of them are on a short 2-week holiday, and they're trying to tick the big high profile items off on their trip. So they don't often have the time on their trips to think, that track looks interesting, let's go and see where it goes, because it doesn't fit. They need to get to that next item on the list of things we must see while in Morocco.
Right.
And I think that's a shame for a lot of people. I suppose my experience of moving from a sort of normal tourist into an overlander in Morocco was that I'd done most of the tourist stuff before so when I was coming in the early days in the Land Cruiser, all my interest was spending as much time off the asphalt as possible and doing as much exploring as possible. And then in later years, as I was spending 6 months a year in Morocco, I had a lot more time to explore and go down tracks which weren't on a map. So I don't know where it goes. I don't know if it's a dead-end valley with a little village at the end, or it's an epic mountain pass crossing the whole Atlas. And that's having the time to do that. It just makes
a trip. Or coming back.
Yeah. A
lot of it's highly accessible to a lot of Europeans, obviously, because we've seen so many here, because I think of it almost like similar to Baja to North America. You're seeing like a lot of snowbirds come down. It's the closest faraway place, once you cross the border it feels completely different. So being pretty highly accessible means that you can keep coming back and maybe taking a little chunk or a little region and really honing in on it. But speaking of which, we were talking about the big highlights. The big highlights.
So we'd come down to the middle of the country with the Rift Mountains, the Middle Atlas, the Wrekin Plateau, and as you're working your way south, you get about halfway through the Middle Atlas Mountains, where you get down to maybe an hour's drive north of Marrakesh, and then you start to see the High Atlas looming on the horizon in front of you. Depending on the time of year, there'll still be snow on the mountains, and that's when the sense of adventure really starts to kick in, I think. The north of the country, there's a lot of great stuff, but for me, it's the High Atlas Mountains and south, which is where the really top overlanding is in Morocco. And the High Atlas Mountains run from the Atlantic coast, hit the Atlantic coast between Essaouira and Agadir, and they run all the way across to Ereshidi and Midelt on the east end. The tallest mountain range in North Africa. I think Mount Toubkal's over 4,000 metres, I forget, but there's some stunning driving. You can spend a week above 2,500 metres on tiny narrow mountain tracks, valleys lined with small traditional Berber villages. My recommendation for the High Atlas is come and see it in the spring. Guess March, April time. There's still the snow on the peaks of the mountains, but all the wildflowers and the almond blossom are coming out. Everything's green and lush and vibrant. It's just a spectacular time of year to spend time in the mountains. Highest drivable point in the mountains, 3,700 metres. The summit of Jebel Aisha, just south of Midelt. There's multiple passes at over 3,000 metres. A lot of the good tracks are being sadly lost to development and progress for the country. Morocco's road building programme is progressing at a rate which is absolutely astonishing. So it keeps us busy trying to keep on top of where the asphalt is and where it isn't. We've lost almost all of the north-south off-road crossings of the High Atlas Mountains now. There's one section left which they've been working on for a few years with a view to asphalt it, and that's the route from Agdal in the High Atlas Mountains down to Balmain de Dadis through the Dadis Gorge, and there's a short section of piece still from Tizi Ouzou, just under 3,000 metres south out of the mountains, which is still a stunning drive. So if you're coming to Morocco, go and do that one now while it's still a dirt track. It would still be a stunning drive with asphalt, but
it's a different feel.
It's a different feel to it. But there's also a lot of east-west tracks to do, and I've put together one of my standard tours, which I normally run each spring, is a High Atlas tour. It's 10 days doing the full length of the High Atlas, off-road as much as possible, and it's been a great success. It's got some really interesting scenery. We start at the Atlantic coast, where it's a lot of rolling hills and olive plantations, argan groves, agricultural, and we cross over. Heading east, we sort of skirt round the south side of Mount Toubkal, up onto some high plateaus. Nice bit of wild camping up there. Sometimes the temperatures can be a bit cool, and we take in several of the high altitude passes. We've got some stunning tracks along sheer cliff faces, running alongside the edge of a river in a steep valley, and all the way into Midelt, and our next one is mid-April, and one of the things we're going to try and do with that trip is we're going to try and reach the summits of Jebel Aisha, 3,700 metres. Not been up there yet. We're not sure how much weather damage there's been over winter, but we're going to go and have a look, and part of the adventure.
Totally. It's incredible that you can go from being that high and there's snow, and then you can come down south and southeast and you're in dunes.
Yes, I mean, we're right on the edge of the Sahara here in Zagora. In a day's drive, you can be up at Oukemden, just south of Marrakesh, which is one of Morocco's ski resorts, with Swiss chalets, snow on the ground, ski lift. Okay, don't come to Morocco for a skiing holiday. It's not the best skiing in the world, but there are a few ski resorts. But yeah, a day's drive from, well, we're 30 degrees at the moment, bright sunshine up into the snow of the mountains is possible.
And that's another thing that makes it so multi-layered here, is that you can be on the coast surfing, you can be in Marrakesh doing, city tours and staying in a riad or going to a hammam or going through the souk, but then you can also be up in the High Atlas hiking or doing passes. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible diversity.
It's a country which I think for visitors offers almost everything you want.
Yeah,
and you can come and do your extreme sports. There's a lot of windsurfing, kite surfing along the coast, all the way from sort of Casablanca area all the way down to the bottom of Morocco, down to Dakhla. A lot of opportunities for water sports. Some fantastic landscape for mountain biking, and again we're seeing, since COVID, a lot more people coming to Morocco for cycling holidays. Very popular with the camping van brigade, the overlanders, the package holiday makers. There's just something for everybody, and it's, at the moment, Morocco's is positioned with its tourism industry where if you want to come and you want to have a week, 2 weeks, however long, in 5-star luxury, the very best treatment and hotels you could expect to find anywhere, you can do that. If you want to come here and live on 10, 15 euros a day and camp and eat out at local places, you can do that as well. So there really is something for everybody here. For sure. And yeah, we got to the High Atlas. Yeah. And that's they're one of my favourite areas to spend time, particularly in the spring and late spring as things start to get a little bit hotter in the desert. But south of the high Atlas Mountains is where you start to get into the desert areas of Morocco. There's a lot of online debate or scientific debate about technically where the Sahara starts.
Yes.
Different sources put it in all sorts of different locations. Tour companies will tell you it starts in one location just because they think it's the romance of the Sahara will sell a few more holidays. But really with Morocco, once you get south of the Atlas Mountains, you're starting to hit the desert regions.
What's the feeling of the Sahara? Like, how do you know? It's just, is it where is it? What does it feel like? How is it different? Exactly.
Yeah, that's almost impossible to quantify, I think. You could say it's a slight change in the air, but that's probably just the dust in the wind.
Yeah.
But you certainly, coming south through the Atlas Mountains, if you're coming due south from Marrakesh or further east of that, as you get out the south side of the mountains, you notice the landscape has changed, and there's less vegetation, it's clearly more arid, there's more dust, more rocks. There's that very noticeable difference in the greenery you've seen further north in the country. If you come south through the Atlas Mountains closer to the coast, so sort of Agadir across to Ouarzazate area, you come down into the Dra Valley. Sorry, not the Dra Valley, the Sousse Valley, which is a big agricultural area. It's one of Morocco's main rivers, so there's a lot of fruit and vegetable production goes along that valley. So that area, you don't get quite that same sense of getting into the desert area.
Right.
And then we've still got two other mountain ranges to get through before we really get to, I guess, what most people really think of the desert. So you've got to the west end of Morocco, you've got the Anti-Atlas Mountains, which again are completely different to the other mountains you've seen. Brilliant for geology enthusiasts because there's no vegetation, there's no topsoil. You can see the strata and the rock formations. Great area for exploring, lots of fantastic roads, a lot of old granaries, agadirs they call them, on the top of the hilltops, which were a fortification for the local villages to protect their valuables if they were attacked by a neighbouring tribe. East of the Anti-Atlas Mountains, you've got Jebel Saro Mountains, which, like the others, they're all very different. These are often called the Black Mountains. Very dark stone, some fantastic rock formations. A lot of people say it's very reminiscent of some of Western USA and the Rock Monument Valley and that side of things. And it looks all a little bit Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth landscape. So again, a very different area to explore. Some great driving through there. Some interesting historical sites. There was the local tribe in that region of Morocco fought the French for the longest, the Eight Atta tribe, and there's a war memorial up in the mountains to a famous battle with them where a handful of the tribesmen held off quite a significant force of the French Foreign Legion and the normal French military people in Morocco at the time. And south of both those mountain ranges is when you get into the real desert and the real fringes of the Sahara. Coming across from the east side along the Algerian border, you've got Afud, Mazougah and Erg Chebi, which is one of Morocco's big dune areas. They're the tallest sand dunes in Morocco. Recent scientific research has revealed that the sand in the base of the dunes is over 13,000 years old.
Wow. And I saw an article you shared about a star dune being found in there as well, which I don't really know what that is. But
no, I'll admit I haven't read the article in full yet. I thought it was of interest to the group, so I shared it. And sometimes I do that, so I know where to find things to read later myself.
Yeah, totally.
And obviously, for off-road enthusiasts, one of the things which put Morocco And the desert areas of Morocco on the map was the early days of the Paris-Dakar rally, which used to come down through Morocco on a regular basis.
Right.
And a lot of that route runs from the east side, from Mazougha, Erg Chebi, across towards the Atlantic and then down towards Mauritania. And so that's a highlight for a lot of people coming to Morocco. We want to drive the Paris-Dakar tracks.
Yeah.
And as you come west from Erg Chebi and Mazougha, very popular area for all sorts of off-road activities. So you get the big rally raid teams coming down to do winter testing, off-season testing. You get a lot of independent travellers. You get a lot of tour groups. There's all sorts of charity events running with unsuitable cars out in the desert. I'm making it sound like a very busy area, and it is probably one of the busiest areas for Overland, but you can still spend days out there and not see another person, maybe the odd local nomad or a herd of goats. So it's not that congested. Eventually you get across to where we're sat tonight, Zagora. Very well known, again going back to the days of the Paris-Dakar rally, really a lot of good 4x4 specialist garages in town, all of whom will claim they worked on the Paris-Dakar, even the guys who are too young to have been able to use a spanner when the Paris-Dakar last came through. But it's a bit of history they're very keen to hang on to and keep alive here. It was also a key stopping point on the camel caravans coming up from Timbuktu up towards Europe.
Great campsites here too.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. This is one.
This one is
Fabulous.
just one of the best campsites in Morocco. It's got such a nice, calm, relaxing atmosphere, and we're 200 metres from a main road.
Yeah.
And all we can hear is
some motorbikes.
A motorbike over the wall and the odd voice from somebody walking past outside. It's such a relaxing place to spend time.
And the palms provide shade because it was pretty warm the last little while. And then there's another spot down the road that we really enjoyed as well that smells like jasmine. Just so much perfumey jasmine in the best possible way at that point. So nice. So yeah, lots of great places to camp. And not expensive.
No. I forget what we're paying here, but it's a 5-6 euros a night.
Yeah.
It's not.
There's a pool.
Yeah, they do great food, and when it's not Ramadan, there's more wine and beer on offer. And
right.
we will admit we drank all the last stocks of beer in the campsite. So don't come here now if you want to get a cold beer with your meal, because they've run out until after Ramadan, unfortunately.
But south of here.
So the main road, an hour and a half drive on the main road running south will take you to the end of the asphalt, heading south, and a little village called Mohammed, which is. It's an odd little place.
Like Wild West.
Yeah, it's got a bit of a
vibes.
Wild West feel to it, and it's, as I say, it's the end of the asphalt heading south. The next thing, if you keep carrying on south from there, is the Algerian border, and headaches with the military if you get too close. But as you turn west from Mohammed, you head out towards Erg Chegaga, which is another one of Morocco's big sand dune areas, and that's the largest geographical area of sand dunes. So the dunes aren't quite as tall as Erg Chebi, not quite as dramatic, but much bigger area and much less tourist development. Mazougha and Erg Chebi over the years has become saturated with tourism to the point where it's got a real Disneyland feel to it. There's hundreds of people coached in there every day to do the camel ride or the quad bike ride into the dunes, watch the sunset, camp in a nomad's tent, come back the next morning, and it's ruined what makes spending time in the dunes special, which is that peace and the quiet and the sunset and the opportunity to reflect without any exterior stimulus going on. And so Erg Chegaga I much prefer, because it's an hour and a half off-road from the end of the tarmac to get there, so it's not so accessible to your average tourist. There are more and more camps springing up along the north edge of the Erg for tourist use, which is a bit of a shame, but it brings in good money for the local community. So it's a difficult one to balance. West out of Ergjagarga, another almost legendary area for overlanding and off-roading is Lakariki. And almost everybody who comes to Morocco on the first time has done a bit of research about the country and off-road driving. That's one of the highlights of the trip. It's a huge dry lake bed. It can be a fast drive if the weather's been bad and it's been raining. It can be a muddy bog of horrible sticky mud, and there's lots of tales on the internet of people getting stuck down there for days when weather conditions turn. Further west from there, you can run along the Algerian border for another 60-70 kilometres, again on the old Paris-Dakar piste, and it's signposted the rally piste, but you get very, very close to the Algerian border there, so there's a lot of military present, a number of military checkpoints you need to go through, present your passport, explain where you're going, what you're doing. Some of that works as a good safety net. If something happens to you, they've got a record that on Monday the 19th of whenever, 2 Europeans, 2 overlanders went through, 2 Land Cruisers, whatever. They know roughly where you are in the country. Further west, there's a military zone where access is restricted, so you have to kick back up again onto the asphalt roads, onto the main road, and then there's a bit of a zigzag there as you head out towards the Atlantic coast and Tantan. My personal opinion is the southwest corner of Morocco, before you get into the Western Sahara area, is the best bit of the Moroccan desert. And that's a top secret tip. I don't really want everybody going down there and discovering it, but it's not as well known as the southeast corner and the Zagora to Mazuga bit.
Yes.
It's a little bit more basic down there. There's slightly less campsites, although there is another one of my top 10 campsites in Morocco down there who do a fantastic gin and tonic at a reasonable price, and have a swimming pool and a good restaurant, and the campsite's okay as well. But the landscape down there is spectacular. You've got some nice interesting mountain ranges, you've got areas which are very savanna-like with a lot of grasses and trees, and then you've got start to see the flat expanse of the Western Sahara as you start to head south then.
Right.
South from the Tantan area, we start getting into what most of the world refer to as the Western Sahara. In Morocco, it's the southern provinces or the Moroccan Sahara. This is a disputed part of the country, so after the French protectorate pulled out of Morocco and the Spanish pulled out of the Spanish Sahara, there was a bit of a scramble for land, and Morocco walked into the Western Sahara and claimed it theirs, and there was a period of war down there with the locals. Eventually a United Nations ceasefire was agreed, and the area is still internationally disputed. Morocco are very keen to retain it. The local tribes, the Sahrawi tribes, are a little bit keener to have their own area back again, but it's quite a political issue in Morocco. Yeah,
even as far as maps, so we didn't get this map in Morocco, we got it out in the UK actually. And it says Western Sahara on the map, and I've heard that they don't like it's your maps can be confiscated. If they officially the police who confiscate them
and customs. Officially in Morocco, it's illegal to show the Western Sahara as separate to the rest of the country. So for a lot of people coming to Morocco, like you've bought your map in preparation to do your route planning and find your way around. It's been purchased in Europe, outside of Morocco, and there's a line on the map which shows a difference between Morocco and the Western Sahara. And people do get caught with maps coming into the country at customs and get the maps confiscated. And there's also been been instances where overlanders have got a world map on the side of their vehicle showing the route they're going to do, and again there's that separation, and they've been stopped at customs and had to remove the graphics from the vehicles or adjust them so it's not shown as separate.
Is that a flag thing? How would you?
Well, that gets so they
people have flags on the stickers.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, the flag stickers, which I don't have any flag stickers, but then I've only been to Morocco, and so
just one big
flag. The flag. So there is. We're kind of going more into politics than overlanding, so hopefully nobody's getting bored. So you've got the bulk of the Western Sahara region is under Moroccan control, and then it's sandwiched in between the Moroccan bit and Mauritania is a thin sliver of land which is officially called the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, which is a nice snappy title, easy to remember. That's the independent part of the Western Sahara. So when you see a Western Sahara flag, that's the flag for that thin sliver of land sandwiched in between the two.
Right.
The Moroccan bit, standard,
yes.
Red Moroccan flag, gold star, very good. But a lot of people travelling further south into Africa or down to Dakhla to go kite surfing or just to extend their adventures in Morocco, just stick to the coast road. And the Western Sahara is very sparsely populated. There's 4 or 5 big towns, 1 big city, Laayoune. There are very few roads. There's a road which runs from Tantan to Smara, then Smara across to Laayoune, and all the way down the coast to Mauritania. So there's not a lot of opportunity to explore the area if you're sticking to the asphalt.
Right.
For towns down there, a lot of the towns in southern Morocco don't have a lot going for them in terms of tourist attraction. They're functional, they're places to go and do your shopping and find a campsite, do your laundry, buy food, but a lot of them don't have much in the way of sites to go and explore or things, and the Western Sahara probably more so. Laayoune is a big modern city. Morocco has poured a lot of money into developing the city. They pay lower taxes in Western Sahara, which is an incentive by the Moroccan government to get more people to move further south. And some of the other towns are not very exciting. Tafaya, in the northwest corner of the Western Sahara, that's got some interesting history to it. It used to be a base for the French Aeropostale service. And Antoine, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Antoine Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince, he was based there.
Okay. Wow.
And if you go to the town and you spend a bit of time wandering around, you can still see the old Aeropostale buildings. They're still there. You need to look up a little bit beyond the initial facade, but the buildings are still there. And there's a little tiny museum to the Aeropostale service there, which, if you can find the Guardian and he's prepared to open it for you, is worth a visit. You probably get more out of it if you can read French than I did, because my French is appalling and most of the exhibits are in French, but reading about what those guys were doing in trying to deliver mail around the world is just, it's incredible. It's a generation which has passed us all by now, but these guys were trying to do transatlantic flights with planes which would barely get halfway, and then trying to coordinate landing next to a ship to refuel, with the fingers crossed the weather was good enough to be able to land the plane and they could find it. And some of the exhibits in the museum about what some of the transatlantic crossings these guys were doing are just astonishing stories of people built a different way than we are now.
Yes.
Another historical feature just off the coast of Tafaya is Casa del Mar, or Mackenzie's Fort. So this was a fortification which was built just off of the beach of Tafaya by a Scotsman. Mackenzie, who set up the Northwest Africa Company, or the North Africa Company, and one of his ideas was he wanted to cash in on the caravan trade routes and trying to pick up stuff off the caravan trade routes further south and then ship that stuff up into Europe and make his money that way. One of the ideas he had was digging a canal from the Atlantic inland and flooding the Sahara.
Oh boy.
Because he had some information which the altitude was lower further inland than it was at the coast, so if he just dug a channel, the sea would naturally flood in and then he could run ships down to Timbuktu.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, his information was a bit inaccurate and he never managed to get the funding for any investors to go ahead with the project. So that's just off the coast in Tafaya. Heading south along the coastline is just stunning. It's okay if you have to drive down that road from Tantan down to Dakhla. You could do it in a long day, but most people take 2 days. If you're turning around and coming back north, it's 2 days on the same road. So, but the coastline, it's deserted beaches, dramatic cliffs, shipwrecks. It's just wild and exposed and desolate and hostile, and that's I love that drive. Yeah. It can be very, very windy, which they say your fuel consumption heading north will be double heading south because of the wind.
But tell me about, I think when people look up crossing the Western Sahara, the thing that seems to be coming up a lot are mines.
Yes. So the Western Sahara is home still now to this day to the world's largest minefield. During the conflict between Morocco and the Polisario Front, both sides laid huge quantities of mines in the Western Sahara. Not all of them have been cleared. The United Nations have had a long-term presence in the Western Sahara to monitor the ceasefire, and they've also done a lot of mine clearance operations. According to them, they have cleared 90 to 95% of the known landmines. Of course, the known ones are one issue. It's the unknown ones which can be just as important to anybody travelling in the region. And with overlanders and tour companies, there's a slight difference of opinion between some of us about how serious the risk is. So I know some people who, nope, there's no risk down there at all, no problem, go anywhere you want, it's fine. There are other people who just won't go in off-road down there at all because they think the risk is the opposite end of the level. And then there's a few of us sat in the middle ground who think, hang on a minute, it's not quite as bad as everybody makes out, but it's not 100% safe.
Right.
So I run 2 routes on a regular basis for people in the Western Sahara. We do one route which goes all the way down to the Tropic of Cancer and Dakhla before coming back up the Atlantic coast, and I do another one which goes about halfway down through the Western Sahara, and we spend a lot of time off-road out in the desert. We found bullet casings, rocket casings, mortar shells, all sorts of stuff you don't necessarily want to be playing around with out in the desert. There are areas in the desert where there are tyre tracks going off in every direction you can see. Normally a good indication that area is fairly safe. And then there's other areas where all the tyre tracks are in the same place. That's normally an indication of an area where the locals feel there's a risk. Anything which has a strategic military value is a risk area, so water sources, passes through hills, mountains. For some reason they put a lot of mines on the beaches, so there's still a risk out there. I haven't heard about any mine strikes for a couple of years now, but people do hit landmines out there on a reasonably regular basis. It's often the locals who will be way off the tracks, travelling cross country looking for their camels or something, rather than any overlanders off-roaders.
But if you want to Of course, there's always a risk, but the Atlantic route, I don't know if that's the most commonly driven, if you just want to shoot straight down.
Yeah, I mean, it's... If you just want to go and experience some of the Western Sahara, drive down to Dakhla, spend a bit of time, do some kite surfing, eat some oysters, come back up again, it's a completely safe way of doing it. It's a big 2-lane road all the way down to the Mauritanian border. There's a lot of trade goes down that way between West Africa and Europe. Very safe way of doing it.
Cool.
It's when you start wandering around inland where your risk level changes.
And even if you're on the track, which if there are a whole bunch of tire tracks, you should be fine. It's, you know, as overlanders, we're going off of the tracks to camp.
Yeah.
And that's where maybe the risk goes up a bit.
It does a bit. I mean, I think with a degree of local knowledge, some common sense, and just being a little bit cautious. So if you find anything which looks like a mortar shell or a bullet or a metal object you're not quite sure it is, keep well away from it and leave it alone. Don't go throwing rocks at it or jumping up and down on it, because you never know. So I look at the risk down there for what I do is being similar to crossing a busy main road. You know, you know there's a danger, but you're doing things yourself to try and manage that risk. You look both ways, make sure nothing's coming, and off you go.
Yeah, and you're taking other people there, so you calculate the risk for yourself, but also for others.
Yeah,
so
and it's 2017. So traditionally, the belief was there were only landmines in the Western Sahara, so everybody assumed where that straight line is on the map, which shows the difference between the disputed territory and Morocco, south of that line was where you got landmines.
Right.
But in the days the war was going on, the front line between Morocco and the Western Sahara was very fluid, and it went all the way as far north as Tantan, which is quite a significant difference back into Morocco. And just off the road between Tantan and Smara, there's a load of old buildings, remains of old buildings, which look really, really interesting. They're beehive-shaped buildings. They're the sort of thing which you just want to go and have a look at. Mm-hmm. They've been listed on iOverlander and some of the other travel apps as a good place to wild camp. 2017, an English overlander and his wife went in there. They parked up, walking around, and they found anti-tank mines in the access track to it. And that changed a lot of people's view of where the risk was in the Western Sahara and the southern edge of Morocco.
Gotcha. Who knows?
Yeah.
Calculate your risk just like any other border crossing.
It's what, as overlanders, we're constantly doing is we're always assessing risk and trying to manage it. It's a fundamental part of travelling this way.
Yes.
And some risks are not for everybody, and they don't go overlanding. They go and sit next to a swimming pool and drink cocktails for their holidays. We go out and do crazy things in countries most people wouldn't visit and spend weeks off-road in the middle of nowhere.
So let's switch gears, go back up north, and talk a little bit more about getting here.
Oh, so...
Because there are multiple ferry routes that are coming in from Europe.
Yeah.
Paperwork involved, logistics.
So for most people visiting Morocco, they're coming in via Europe. It is possible to shift directly into Morocco, but it's not a very popular route. I do know I think Air Canada will fly motorbikes in freight into Casablanca.
Oh, really?
Which has been used quite a lot, but very few people ship vehicles directly into Morocco. Most people will ship into Europe and then drive down through Europe from whichever port they've shipped into, and then use one of the regular ferry services from Europe into Morocco. You've got 3 different options for getting into Morocco from Europe. You've got ferries from Italy, France or Spain. The Spanish ferries are the shortest and the quickest, and there's multiple different routes from Spain, but the bulk of people go down to the southern tip of Spain and either cross from Tarifa to Tangier city, or Algeciras to Tanger Med, which is the new port on the north coast.
Yeah, we did that one.
Hour and 30 minutes on a ferry and you're in Morocco. It's a very short, efficient route. You could also get a ferry from Marseille and set in the south of France, or from Genoa in Italy. And those ferries are 48 to 56 hours, so they're a bit
longer,
bit slower. But if you're coming from the eastern side of Europe, or you're coming from mainland Europe, for a lot of people that's an acceptable time.
Sure, it cuts down your driving time, wear and tear on the vehicle, etc., etc. Yeah.
And I mostly use the Algeciras Tanger Med route. It works well for me. It's efficient. Tail end of COVID, when the lockdown was lifted here, our only way of getting back to Europe was using the ferry service to Marseille, and it wasn't a very good experience. But some of that was possibly COVID and all the rest of it. So ferries run virtually every hour. There's 5-6 different ferry companies running, so you can just turn up at the port and drive onto the next ferry available and be in Morocco 90 minutes later. Very, very nice and easy. Most people get granted a visa on arrival for Morocco.
Yeah. So, but you do passport control on the boat.
Yeah, passport control is
just wander around till you find
done
it.
On the ferry, so don't leave your passport in the car, take it with you. Look for the queue of people, they'll stamp your passport on the ferry, and they won't let you off the ferry if it hasn't been stamped. So yeah, visas stamp is done on the passport on the ferry. As a tourist, you get 90 days on entry. You are limited to 180 days a calendar year officially. There are people who've been living and working in Morocco for years and using tourist visas and just every 30 days flying out of Morocco and coming back in, but officially it's 180 days a year.
But you can, if you do your 90, you can go to the police or the local to get an extension.
You can go to the local police station and extend it up to the 180 days.
Right.
It's a bit of a hit and miss process. Some police stations will, no, you can't do that. It's not possible anymore. The rules have changed. Others will quite happily do it. Right. Never really managed to get to the bottom of why you've got those differences. I suspect some police stations just don't want the paperwork to deal with. And some of the campsites will help you with that process. Some of them do require you to book onto the campsite and pay for a few weeks accommodation before they will help. Some will just do it and they'll say 100 dirham for doing your visa extension for you. So that is a possibility. Vehicles, carnet de passage is not recognised by Morocco, so you don't need one of those, which makes it nice and easy. You get a temporary import on arrival. You get a little white credit card size slip of paper, which you mustn't lose because you need that on exit. That's your temporary import
and then
documentation.
You get that when you go through, when you get off the boat.
That's off the boat when you go through customs at the ferry terminal. Nice straightforward process. Customs will pull you to one side. They'll take your vehicle registration documents, passport. They will go and do the processing on that. They will have a look in the vehicle. It's a bit of a cursory search. You'll get asked if you've got any weapons, any drones, because drones are prohibited in Morocco or restricted heavily in Morocco. You need permits, several permits to bring a drone into Morocco. And you might get a casual search with a sniffer dog. Since COVID, they now do a random x-ray on some vehicles coming into the country, so they do all that at customs. Eventually a nice customs officer will return with your completed import card, and then you're free to leave the ferry terminal and go and enjoy Morocco.
So I would say we didn't have a search done for some reason, but they took our insurance paperwork, so your vehicle insurance paperwork, and I think had a few issues with our Alberta registration and license. Like they were like, this isn't the right document, we need your green card. So I think from Canada versus Europe, it was a bit confusing, which is totally fair. And we probably should have prepared a translation or something to hand along with it. So if you're coming from the US or Canada or abroad, that's not from Europe, like somewhere where they probably don't see as many of those documents.
I mean, I suspect for the big numbers of vehicle-based tourists coming to Morocco, French, Spanish, UK, Dutch, Germany, Netherlands, Italians. So they're used to seeing the vehicle paperwork and registration details from those countries. When something a bit more unusual comes in, they're probably going to start asking a few more questions because they're not used to it.
Absolutely. So, yeah, in retrospect, I probably would have prepared like a fiche or a document that had the translation in French.
Yeah.
The other thing was we came in really late because that ferry, I believe, doesn't really run on time. Like for us, it was 2 hours late.
No, between the Spanish and the Moroccans, getting anything running to a timetable seems to be an impossible task. So the timetable is at best a guide.
Yeah.
I think I'm 12, 13 years now of getting the ferry on a regular. I don't think I remember one running on time.
So doing an early morning would be better. We got caught in the... Or not. We got caught in the dark though, and then
if you're coming into Morocco for the first time, arrive with enough time to drive to your first stop, your first night's accommodation. Don't come in after dark, and because
I think our ferry was supposed to be like 2 p.m. and then it was 4:30, and then by the time we got through customs, it was dark.
Yeah.
And then we had a crazy windstorm, so we camped at the port anyways. But there aren't a lot of good camping options near the port.
So really, from if you're coming into Tanger Med, which is one of the busier ferry terminals, your first stops as a vehicle-based traveller is on a formal campsite. There's a nice campsite in Tangier city. But if you've come into Tanger Med, if you want to go to Tangier, you'd probably get the ferry straight into Tanger city.
Right.
You've got a campsite in Chef Chouen, which is a beautiful town to spend time in, 2.5 hour drive from the port. The other popular first night stop is Asila on the Atlantic coast, 90 minutes drive straight down the motorway. That's nice and easy. The 2 campsites in town, nothing particularly special, but they're due for your first night.
Right.
But you can stay in the car park at the ferry terminal. That is always an option, but it's busy, it's noisy, not the best place to get your first night's experience in Morocco.
Agreed.
So my general advice is, don't come in late afternoon where a delay might mean you end up arriving in a strange new world after dark, slightly confused. You might not have got a local SIM card sorted out, so your access to the internet has suddenly vanished. And that support network everybody's so used to using now is gone, and you're going to have to find your own way around. Come in a bit earlier, get in daylight, give yourself enough time to get to your first night's stop, and it makes life a little bit more relaxing on your first day, half a day in Morocco.
What about time of year?
Time of year.
It was really interesting. Family and friends, we were like bundled up with toques and sweaters. In some areas are still quite cold, or even dropping below 0 degrees Celsius here. And I think that surprised them because they're like, "You're going to Morocco, though." Yeah,
I think a lot of people sat back at home, wherever that is. You talk about Morocco, and they think they mentally picture the Sahara Desert. They think it's going to be scorching hot all year round, clear blue skies, and nothing but sand. And it's not. It's a much more varied country. That traditionally they've always said Morocco is a cold country with a hot sun, and over winter you really feel that. As soon as you walk into the shade, the temperature plummets, but in direct sunlight
it's warm,
it's nice and warm, and you can feel the power of the sun. So people come all year round to Morocco, generally June through to the end of August. For the majority of people, the temperatures are too high, so you can be looking at temperatures 40 to 50 degrees. Overnight temperatures not dropping down below 30, particularly in the desert areas. Even up at altitude or along the coast, you could be looking at mid-30s centigrade, bit more reasonable overnight. So the summer months is very quiet for foreign tourists.
Right.
Some still come. A lot of people from Southern Europe who may be used to summers in the mid-30s anyway, it's not such a big... But for those of us from Northern Europe or more cooler climes, the summer months are just... It stops being fun when you're dealing with that level of temperature.
And then you're dealing with overheating and your vehicle, everything is so hot and...
This day and age, it's so easy to be in your air-conditioned cocoon in a vehicle and not realise how hostile the environment is until something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And if you're trying to dig a vehicle out of sand in 50 degrees, it's a quick way to put yourself at serious risk. Mm-hmm. Winter... A lot of people come to Morocco over winter. A lot of camper vans come to Morocco over winter. The temperatures... 15 to 20, 25 degrees on average, clear blue skies, not much rain, but as soon as the sun sets, the temperature can plummet. It's great if you've got indoor living space, cheap winter sunshine. You living in Morocco, if you base yourself, even on a formal campsite, you can be living for 10 or 15 euros a day quite happily. Mm-hmm. For me, the best times for Morocco, spring and autumn. So my annual season is I do March through to May in the spring and then September through to December. And I've already mentioned, I think spring is the best time of year to explore Morocco, particularly the Atlas Mountains and the Middle Atlas. Spring is just a fantastic time. And if you're doing a longer trip, if you're not just coming for a couple of weeks, if you're coming for a month or 2 months, coming out early March and being here through spring, as the temperatures increase, you acclimatise to the temperatures quite quickly. So it's not such a sudden shock when you're dealing with 30, 45 degree temperatures. Mm-hmm. The autumn, again, in reverse, you get out, you come out sort of September time. September's still a bit quiet, but the temperatures can be good, but cooling off towards late November, December, but still great time to come out and be more do more living outside of a vehicle or accommodation. The temperatures really, in terms of tourist numbers, April and October are the 2 peak months. Okay. So we're just now 10 days away from start of peak season. The Easter fortnight is very, very busy for Morocco for all types of tourism. Next month we've got a lot of the big rallies start in Morocco. There's been a few running already, but mostly they're October, April months as well for some of the big rally raid events. So they're the best months, I think, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe it's me, but if I'm off-road out in the desert, I want it to be hot and sunny. I don't want it to be a cool, easy day. I want to be reminded that I'm in a hostile environment, and if things go wrong, it's a serious issue. It's not just a question of waiting for the next passerby to give me some help. Right.
Okay, let's get back into it.
Yep.
Okay, so people know how to get here now, and they know what time of year to come.
Yep.
I think the next thing that really blew my mind when I came to Morocco were all the languages that are spoken here. So I knew there was a little bit of French, but I wasn't really sure who would be speaking what, or if there was going to be a lot of English or just a little bit. But there's also local dialects and Moroccan Arabic. And tell us a little bit more about
the diversity of Morocco. So Morocco has always had very close ties with Europe. I don't know when the Arabs invaded, several hundred years ago, 1,000 years ago. The indigenous people of Morocco are the Berbers or the Amazigh people, and then you've got the Arabic Moroccans, who a lot of the Berbers, even though they've been here for hundreds of years, still see as the invading infidel. But it's a long, dark history, long time ago. And then Morocco had its time under the previous century and the early days of last century where it was under European control. So the bulk of Morocco was a French protectorate, and the north of Morocco was under Spanish control. Spain also had a town on the Atlantic coast, Sidi Ifni, and then they had the Spanish Sahara, which is now the Western Sahara. Officially, the two official languages for Morocco are Darija, which is Moroccan Arabic, so slightly different to classical Arabic spoken elsewhere in the Islamic world, but a lot of similarities.
But if you're using Google Translate, it doesn't necessarily translate.
No. So Google Translate, I believe, is classical Arabic.
Yes.
So there is some differences.
So that can pose some issues if you're trying to communicate that way.
And to be honest, Google Translate can cause some great laughs trying to have a conversation. It's a brilliant tool for travellers now, but it's still not quite perfect.
Right.
I've had some interesting conversations with mechanics using Google Translate, and it just makes no sense. So Darija Moroccan Arabic is their primary language, and officially their second language is French.
Okay.
That's across the country. There are then 5 Berber dialects on different regions, and I forget what all of them are. There's Tashlahate, which is the High Atlas dialect. There's Kalua, there's Riffian, which is from the Rif Mountains, and then there's 2 others I can't remember off the top of my head. So it's a country which certainly traditionally has 7 different languages in one population. And in the early days we started coming, we learned a little bit of Moroccan Arabic and a little bit of Tashlahate, the High Atlas language, and talking to Moroccan friends, depending from where they were, we could have conversations which another Moroccan guy couldn't understand because they didn't speak that dialect or that language.
Right.
The north of Morocco, you find a lot of people speak Spanish because of the days of that was under Spanish control. There's a big move in Morocco now to drop French as their official second language and switch to English, which will change things completely. Historically, I'm jumping around a little bit on the process here, but historically, certainly under the old king of Morocco, the Berber dialects were heavily suppressed. So you weren't allowed to write them, you weren't allowed to teach them in schools. But under the current king, he's a lot more forward thinking, a lot more middle, and he is now allowing teaching of Berber in schools. You'll see a lot of the road signs now are in Arabic and the Amazigh language, which is a modern Berber language across North Africa. There was a lot of different regional variations, and I think in the 1960s the Berber community decided that it would be good to have a universal language. So there's this modern
Interesting.
Berber.
Is Berber a term that we should be using?
Oh, so it's... on one hand, yes, it's Berber comes from the Roman word for barbarian, so in a lot of ways it's a derogatory term for the local people, the indigenous people, but they use it themselves. They will say, I'm a Berber. But what they really call themselves is the Amazigh, which translates as the free people. And that's where I got my company name from. I wanted something which kind of summed up overlanding and the freedom that brings you, and also tied me into the region I'm operating tours in.
So
the downside is I have to... Sorry?
As a traveller, we would say Amazigh.
Yeah, I think you're better to use the word Amazigh than Berber, but they won't take offence if you use Berber.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not something to get hung up on or worry about. It's not... Although I said it was seen as a derogatory term, they don't take big offence at being called a Berber.
Yeah, the interactions I've had, they have referred to themselves as Berber to me, or they've said these are the words to use in Berber, or they've said to my friend Ernesto, who's Venezuelan, you look like you're Berber. And I'm like, I don't know. What did it?
It's, as I say, I don't think it's
more people.
It's something which, if you're somebody who's interested in learning more about the country you're travelling in and the history and the culture and the people, it's something I think you should know. But it's not something to worry about if you come to Morocco. So I can't say that because they might get offended by it.
Just be aware.
Yeah, certainly something to be aware of.
Yeah. And then police, I've been finding mostly converse in French.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the police, Morocco has quite a wide range of security services. There's 3 different types of police. There's the auxiliary forces, there's the military. But the majority of the police, being in the police force is a good job for a Moroccan. It's well paid. So a lot of the people in the police force are well educated. They've got good jobs and they speak French. And I think French is used for a lot of the legal processes in Morocco rather than Arabic. Then during the days of the Protectorate, a lot of the Moroccan legal system is virtually a carbon copy of the French legal system.
Right.
So well known for having loads of paperwork and unnecessary bureaucracy. Having spent a day in the courts in Meknes, not because I'd done anything wrong, interesting day, but offices which were piled floor to ceiling with paper filing systems, very few computers, ledgers, big books, fascinating experience.
But most of the time people will be interacting with the police at checkpoints, and so far our experience has been it's pretty casual. You just slow down when you see them.
So
there's usually a sign.
As you start to travel around Morocco, you will notice there's a significant police presence in the country, and on the way in to most towns there will be a police checkpoint, and there tends to be 2 different types of checkpoint. They look identical as you approach them. One checkpoint has a stop sign with the word stop on it in French, halt, and the other alternative is one which has ralentir, which means slow down. The ones which say halt come to a complete stop and wait to be told to move through. The ones which say slow down, you just need to slow down and drive through. If you're ever uncertain about it, just stop and wait for the policeman to wave you through.
Yep. Because you can get a ticket, right?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people have been given tickets, I think, for that.
There's Morocco. I said Morocco has a big police force. They also have a lot of radar guns.
Yeah, they
and they're very keen on using them. So it's coming here as a vehicle-based traveller. The chances of you getting a ticket for something are pretty high, to be honest. But it's on the spot fines. The fine level's 150 dirham, so that's 15 euros, 300 dirham, 30 euros, or 400 dirham, 40 euros. It's a payable on the spot fine. It doesn't follow you back home. You don't get points on your licence. You don't have to declare it to your insurance company. You get stopped. You're quite embarrassed. The police are always, my interactions with them, they've always been very, very polite and very apologetic. It's like, I'm terribly sorry, but you were driving too fast. It's not your fault. It's my fault. I've been stupid.
Right.
There's a lot of discussion about police corruption in some of the groups and forums, and historically there has been a lot of corruption in Morocco. They've been a big process to clean things up. I've been driving here for 25 years. I've had in all that time, and I've been stopped for speeding more times than I care to admit. It's often you drive around the corner, you're like, wow, look at that view. You look back at the road and there's a policeman with a radar gun, and it's too late by that point. But in all those years I've been driving, I've had 2 occasions where I've been stopped and it hasn't been a legitimate offence, with evidence produced and a receipt for the paperwork. And both of them were, when you realise it wasn't legitimate, you're angry with yourself, you're irritated, you want to go and make a formal complaint, but it's not a big deal. All the times, speeding's the common one. Easy to do. You're in an unusual country. There's not always a speed limit sign. Sometimes you thought you knew what the speed limit was, but it changed and you hadn't noticed the sign. So that's the common one to get.
Passing someone on a solid line.
Yeah, overtaking on a solid white line and not stopping at a stop sign. They're the 3 big hits. There are other offences. Driving without insurance is very serious offence here. Something which does come up a lot in overlanding forums and groups is conversations about insurance for Morocco. We didn't mention it when we were talking about visas and things.
Yes.
It's a legal requirement to have insurance. End of story. And we see people in the group saying, yeah, but I spent a month in Morocco. Nobody ever asked to see my insurance. I've spent years driving around the UK and never been asked to show my insurance. It's still a legal requirement. But in Morocco, they treat it very, very seriously. And if you're involved in an accident and it's your fault and you don't have insurance, you go straight to prison until you pay up. And they take your vehicle. And it's one of these things where your embassy is not going to help in that situation. They're going to say, you didn't have insurance, it's your fault, we can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. So if you can get insurance from your home country, a green card, brilliant. If you can't get insurance, you can buy Assurance Au Frontiers at the port of arrival. It's a fixed rate price. It's only gone up €4 in the last 10 years. Current price is €96 for 30 days cover. And if you buy a month or 3 months policy, you get a bigger discount. So it's about €200 at the moment for 3 months, I think.
Gotcha. Worth it.
So yeah, and I don't. There are drink driving limits. To be honest, we're overlanders. Most of the time when the sun sets, we're parked up somewhere. Yep. Getting ready for a camp or a chat with somebody else. We're not driving around after a party or anything.
No.
We tend to do that after we've stopped driving.
Yeah. Speaking of which, okay, we should talk about that because right now it's Ramadan here.
Yeah.
And also finding alcohol in this country is a little bit more challenging than it would be in Spain or France or Canada or the US or the UK. So, yeah.
So, where are we going? Ramadan or drink? I would always start to sound like an alcoholic when we start talking about alcohol, because I talk to people, I say, you go there's a bar. Over there, that cafe will sell you a beer or two. You can buy alcohol in this shop. And it's
the same with like non-dairy milk though. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's...
You know, maybe not the exact same.
When you've come from Europe or from North America, where you're used to being able to walk down to almost any shop and buy alcohol in any town and things, all of a sudden you're in an Islamic country where things aren't quite as easy. So it does become quite a popular topic of conversation with travellers is, where can I get a nice wine or a beer
and it's not
drink?
Illegal here,
It's not illegal, and Morocco has quite a good alcohol industry. There's the main 2 local beers are Flag and Casablanca. Both of them are okay after a hot day in the desert if they're cold, but you probably wouldn't buy them outside of Morocco. So, you know, if you've got a wider range of selections, there are better things out there. But they're the big supermarket chains in Morocco, so Carrefour, they have quite a range of beers available now. Most of them will have an alcohol section available. Mm-hmm. Morocco produces quite a lot of its own wine. Some of it is okay, some of it best left alone. But they produce some good wines. So there's an alcohol industry here. There's a big tourist industry, so there's a demand from the tourists.
And some of those locations like Carrefour, the alcohol will be in a separate room or basement.
Yeah, so it's not like what you're used to in your supermarket at home, where you just go to the alcohol aisle and you pick what you want and you go to the main till and you pay and off you go. A lot of the supermarkets, the alcohol section is separate. It's often slightly hidden away, maybe round the back of the store, and you have to walk around the outside through an unmarked door or down into the basement. So it's not quite as obvious as you used to.
Very cloak and dagger.
It is a bit. But there's plenty of places to find it. South of the country, it gets a little bit more challenging. If you're somebody who likes to have a drink on a regular basis, you need to plan a little bit further ahead, or you need to bring enough supplies with you to get through.
How much is the limit?
So officially, the limit is 1 litre per person of alcohol coming into Morocco. But you come in through Tanger Med, Tangerville, they know most people coming in on holiday are bringing way more than that, and they're really not that bothered by it.
Okay.
If you come in, and we haven't touched on this, so Spain has 2 cities in Morocco.
That's right.
So Ceuta and Melilla are 2 Spanish cities on mainland Morocco. again, Ceuta is a very popular point of entry. So you can catch a ferry from Spain across the Straits of Gibraltar and you can arrive in Spain. Except it's in Africa.
Right.
And then you need to drive through Ceuta and cross into Morocco at the border. A lot of people like doing that route. I haven't done it myself, but they do have a lot of problems with illegal immigrants trying to get into those enclaves, because once they get through the border fence, they're technically in Europe, so they come under EU legal protection. They have human rights issues which are better legislated than the Moroccan side of things. So every now and again they try and storm the fence at Ceuta and the border's shut, so it can be a little bit disruptive. And I have also been told by several people they can be a little bit tighter on alcohol limits coming in from Ceuta into Morocco.
I see. Okay.
But yeah, there's stuff to be found if you start looking for it.
Sure.
And it's not a big problem. You just need to plan a little bit further ahead.
And then if it's Ramadan, so for this year, it's essentially from, I can't remember which day it started. Maybe like
so it was
ago?
the
March? It's like
12th of March, and it's a full month where the locals don't eat, drink or smoke during the day.
Is it from sun up to sundown?
From sunrise to sunset, and it changes the way things operate in the country. A lot of people, we get a lot of questions. You go, oh, we're coming to Morocco, but it's going to be Ramadan. Will everything be closed? No. The big tourist destinations, Marrakesh, Fez, Agadir, Essaouira, things are still open to deal with the tourist trade. This year, Ramadan, 12th of March through till mid-April, it's peak tourist season. Morocco's not going to miss out on that income just because it's Ramadan. Some places, hardly anything open during the day. Going back to the alcohol question, a lot of alcohol sales stop 5 days before Ramadan and don't resume until 5 days after Ramadan. So things get a little bit harder than they were outside to find alcohol. Again, not completely impossible. Carrefour in Marrakesh is currently selling alcohol, but you have to take your passport to prove you're not a Muslim or a Moroccan and you should be fasting.
Yeah.
And I've been in Morocco for Ramadan since 2017, and the big advice would be you just need to plan ahead a little bit further.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at grocery shopping, food shopping, don't expect all the shops in the next town to be open. If where you are the shops are open, stock up, have a couple of days worth of supplies with you.
And they open up in the evening again, right?
Yeah.
And then the locals will shop in the evening for the next day.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, so traditionally with Morocco, whereas in most Western societies, we'd go and do a weekly food shop. We'd go to a supermarket once a week. We do a big shop. That's it. We don't need to worry about it again. A lot of Moroccans live, I'll try to put this in the right words, but meal to meal, day to day. So they will shop. They'll go out mid-afternoon and shop for the evening meal. They will do the same next morning for breakfast and for lunch. There isn't that culture of doing a big weekly shop. It tends to be either day by day or meal by meal.
And the bread is so much better that way.
Oh, yeah, well, the Moroccan bread is fantastic and it's so cheap. 1.5, 2 dirham for a loaf of bread. So fantastic stuff. But it only lasts for 24 hours. The day after you buy it, it goes rock solid and you could probably build a house out of it.
Yes.
So, yeah, but it's fantastic stuff.
So as a tourist / overlander in Morocco during Ramadan, I think the thing that's important to remember is that, of course, we can still eat and drink.
Yeah. So
but to be discreet.
That's another regular question about being here in Ramadan is, do I have to fast as well? No. Ramadan doesn't apply to non-Muslims, travellers, the very young, the very old, or the sick. So as overlanders, we're travellers and we're non-Muslims. Actually, well, no, not all of us are. Some overlanders are,
sure.
but we're travellers, so we fall under that, and as non-Muslims. So I think in more rural areas, it's worth thinking about eating and drinking publicly during the day in Ramadan, but it's not going to cause a problem if you do. A lot of the busier tourist areas, they really don't mind. So, restaurants are open in Zagora during the day, full of tourists eating. Right. It's not a big problem. Something which will surprise some people during Ramadan in Morocco, and it surprised me the first time I came across it, is in some towns, what sounds like an air raid siren goes off to signal it's time to eat. The end of the day's fasting. If you don't know that, and you're close to the Algerian border or a big military base, and suddenly a very loud siren goes off, it does make you start to wonder what's happened.
I have heard that, and I was wondering.
Yeah, so that's what it is.
Right.
The other thing for travellers during Ramadan is the clocks change for Ramadan. So Morocco...
Fall back?
Yes.
At the beginning.
Morocco didn't used to do daylight savings time, then they did a period where they did daylight savings time, and then they changed the clocks just for Ramadan. Confused everybody like crazy, because the clocks would change for daylight saving, and then a few weeks later they would change for Ramadan. And everybody's going, I don't know what the time is. You'd go to a shop and the blokes, I don't open till 9 o'clock, and you're saying, but it's 10 o'clock now. And then Morocco decided to stop doing daylight savings time, but the clocks go back an hour for Ramadan.
And then they go
then they go forwards again. So so there's this month period where the time changes in Morocco. This day and age with smartphones and things, most of your stuff changes automatically, so you don't really notice too much.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. And it was kind of nice actually that the sun came up earlier for us, so which was nice, especially when it's warm out.
I suppose it depends whether you're a morning person or an evening person. I'm missing the hour of daylight in the evenings. I like the evenings being light rather than an early morning start. But when I'm running with the groups, we have to make the most of the daylight hours. So currently, sunrise is just before 7 a.m. So we're up and getting ready to break camp for 7 till 8, and we need to be set up in camp again by 6 o'clock at the moment, late afternoon.
Yeah, let's talk about camping, like wild camping, what types of campsites there are, and where you can't or shouldn't camp.
Right, yes. Hot topic, and a lot of debate and controversy online, I guess, is the right way of doing it. So a lot of us, we like to wild camp, and we want to wild camp as often as possible, and Morocco is a fantastic country for doing it.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh,
campsites.
Great ones.
Let's start with campsites. Forget all expectations about European standard campsites when you cross into Morocco. You're in Africa now, things are different. Campsites vary hugely. There are some absolutely stunning campsites. This one we're in tonight, brilliant campsite, good toilets and showers. There's a swimming pool. They do some fantastic food. It's not expensive. They've got a laundry service. It ticks all the boxes you want. There are other campsites where somebody's just built a wall round a piece of desert and charging you for the privilege of staying inside it. Prices range from €4 up to about €15 a night.
And some of the caravan parks are up to, what was it, 20, 25?
Yeah, there's a few now which are hitting the €20, €25 mark. They're not ones I tend to use.
No.
I prefer campsites which have got a little bit of character to them.
Yeah, which they're so atmospheric here. Like, they'll bring you a rug. Sometimes everybody, you
get a mint tea when you arrive. You get fresh bread on request.
Beautiful architecture.
Beautiful things. There are the caravan sites along the Atlantic coast, which are European standard, wall-to-wall white camper vans. You could be anywhere in the south of Europe along the Mediterranean coast in those. You're not really experiencing what Morocco's got to offer, in my opinion. And price is no guarantee of a good campsite.
No.
So I one of my top campsites, Borj Biramain, is, I think that's €4 a night, and it's one of the best campsites in Morocco. They've also got great hotel rooms and things.
Oh, the other thing is you most of the time will have to hand over your passport.
Oh yeah. So if you're checking into a campsite or a hotel, you have to fill in a form with a set of standard information which is required by the government. That's your name, your occupation, date of birth, address, where have you come from, where you're going to, date of arrival, date of departure, passport number and police number from when you entered the country, and sometimes your vehicle registration number and a signature, which it is unusual. It's not something you do in Europe, not something you do in most countries.
I think South Africa or Botswana and Namibia, they do that a little bit.
Yeah. But yeah, for a lot of people coming to Morocco, that's a big change.
Totally.
And unusual. And it is a legal requirement. And I've been told off by a policeman for not filling in my passport number properly on the form when he came to check. It's a silly mistake. But so that's campsites. So there are campsites here, there are campsites which are, I would say, the facilities are low quality, but the people who run them are stunning, and the location is stunning. And one of those which I'm thinking about now is Auberge Tislet at the top of the High Atlas Mountains, just outside Image. This is a campsite there. You drive up to it, it looks derelict and run down and miserable and depressing, and you think, why would anybody want to pay to camp here when I can drive a kilometre around the side of a lake and I can camp for free? But you're not experiencing it until you go in. And Malika, who's the Berber Amazigh manageress for the campsite, is just one of the nicest people in the world. And it's a community-owned campsite. They don't generate a lot of income. They've let the maintenance go, so it's a bit rough and ready round the edges. But Malika will treat you like her own children, and she will tell you off if you've not eaten enough, and she'll fuss over you and make sure you're warm enough and all this, and it's just brilliant. And unfortunately she's getting older now. She's got a lot of health issues, and there has been times when the campsite has been closed while she's been away for medical treatment, and people have left comments on iOverlander and other apps saying the campsite's now gone out of business. It hasn't. It's still open. Go and spend your money with Malika.
Yay,
have a bit of fun. Engage with a lovely lady. And if the campsite's quiet, you park on the edge of the lake, still water, 2,000 metres above sea level in the High Atlas Mountains. It's a beautiful place.
Beautiful.
And when I'm in Morocco, I like to do a mix of wild camping and campsites. I like to put some money back into local businesses.
Super important.
I've a number of campsites. I've got good friends who run the campsite, so I like to come and see them. Top campsites in Morocco for me, top recommendations. So Auberge Tislet in Imachil, Chez Francois Camping Wreckham in Boudnib, best campsite in all of Morocco. Go and support Khadija, who's running the campsites. Unfortunately, Francois, her husband, who established the campsite, passed away last year. So it's been a difficult 12 months. We're coming up to a year for them. But go, brilliant campsite, very popular with overlanders, great food. They've got a bar.
We went there twice.
On my recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. So appreciative of that.
Just goes. Another top one is Auberge Atlas in the Todra Gorge. There's this one, Palmerida and Mesru in Zagora, Borj Biramain in Itcht, and I'm running out of my top 10 and I haven't got to top.
That's perfect.
Top 10.
You can't give it all away.
That's given you all a bit of my favourite campsites.
You have to let them do their own research a little bit.
Yeah. Just go and try the campsites.
Yeah,
what I like might not be what you like, and
True.
There's lots of them out there.
So tell me about wild camping.
Wild camping, yeah. So across the country, wild camping is prohibited in national parks and on beaches. So a lot of elements of Morocco's legal system is copied from France and Europe. And that's fairly standard in Europe, is not allowed in national parks, not allowed on beaches. Now, we're in Morocco. Things don't always follow the letter of the law. There are national parks where you can quite happily wild camp because they are so remote, nobody's ever going to know you're there. There are other places. Ürgchebi is a national park. Technically, you're not allowed to wild camp in the dunes there, but there are established campsites. People do it. Every now and again, Morocco starts to clamp down on the rules around there, but it's all a little bit half-hearted. Where there's a lot of sensitivity in Morocco is along the Atlantic coast, and there, as well as the country-wide limitations on wild camping, there are also regions which have local rules about wild camping, and most of those are along the coast between Essaouira and Sidi Ifni. And when we first started travelling around Morocco, you drive from Essaouira down the coast. It's a beautiful drive along the coast, but the last 20-25 kilometres before you got to Agadir, every piece of land between the beach and the road was bumper to bumper vans overwintering for 6 months. There were no facilities, and people never believe me when I say there were thousands of vans, but there were genuinely thousands of vans parked up 6 months of the year. They left their rubbish behind, they dumped their toilets. Eventually the authorities had enough and they banned camping. And they built a load of new European standard expensive campsites, which are very popular, but that area is quite sensitive.
In certain areas, it will have a sign that says no camping.
Yeah,
right?
So there will be signs up. Some of them don't always look official, but again, it's Africa. Things aren't always on a standard uniform sign. Yeah. And if you're reading a review on iOverland or Park for Night and the comments have got something like, well, the police kept coming and telling us we couldn't stay there, that's normally a clue that you're not going to really be allowed to stay there.
And I would rather stay somewhere I know for sure isn't an issue than get woken up with a knock on the door in the middle of the night.
And they will do that. They will turn up at 2 o'clock in the morning and tell you have to move. And that's the worst time. You've been asleep for a couple of hours, you've set up camp, you're all ready to stay the night, and then there's a knock on the door and you're told to move.
Yeah.
So I just think we are seeing post-COVID this year. There's more camper vans in Morocco than I've ever seen before. There's been a huge increase in vehicle-based travellers coming to Morocco over the last 18 months. And after COVID, I don't know yet whether that is just a backlog of people who were going to come and were delayed with COVID restrictions, or whether it's going to be like this every year now moving forward.
Right.
With more numbers of people comes more pressure on facilities, and also there's more people who are maybe bending the rules, or they didn't understand the rules, so they're doing things which they didn't like. And if we're not careful as a community, inappropriate behaviour will eventually result in more and more regulation and more restrictions coming in, like we've seen across Europe and other places where things become unsustainable. So
absolutely.
Try and use a bit of common sense when it comes to wild camping. If it's private property, you need the owner's permission to camp. That's common sense. You're in somebody else's property. That's got to apply everywhere on the planet, surely.
Yes.
The other thing we often get feedback from people is the police turning up and telling them they have to move because the area is not safe. And that's something we didn't touch on tonight, is safety and security. We're talking about Africa and Islamic countries, and a lot of people will be unsure about that. But the police have on a regular basis used safety and security as a reason to move people on. Morocco's a very safe country to travel in. I believe a lot of the time they are just using that because if you're trying to get somebody to move on at 2 a.m. And you just say to somebody, you can't camp here, there's a bit of a language barrier, they may end up in a bit of a standoff. But a lot of people, if the police say to somebody, it's not safe, come and... Right. You're less likely to argue with that. So I think there's a little bit of creative use of language by the police with that. I don't think there's big security issues. There are places along the coast where drug smuggling is going on between Africa and Europe. There's people smuggling going on. There are probably people around in those areas you don't want to encounter with.
Yeah, just using that common sense as a traveler, listening to your gut,
Yeah.
talking to locals, other travelers.
And
all
again,
that
with wild camping, those standard rules we all know about wild camping is get away from a road, away from villages, tuck away out of sight, clear the site, take your litter with you. If there's other litter there, pick a bit extra up. Do something good for the country you're travelling in. Arrive late, leave early, don't leave a trace. It's all the standard common sense stuff, which I would hope everybody does when they're wild camping.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mark. I want to wrap this up before you lose your voice.
I'm getting a bit croaky, but I think some of that was last night when we first met up and chatted.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, thank you for sticking with us if you're still listening. I think the thing is, though, Morocco is so complex, so interesting, so multi-layered, that it deserves this time to spend talking about it, because there are so many details and interesting things, and I'm sure anybody that's listening has like 100% of a better idea of what it is like to travel here, and maybe all that information is really empowering for people to make the decision to come visit.
Well, I hope people find it useful.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, though, for taking the time.
No, it's my pleasure, and with what I'm trying to achieve with the business side of things, which I do, and also helping run the Facebook groups and helping travellers out. I came here 25 years ago. I fell in love with the country. I haven't been anywhere else since. And for some people, that's a bit narrow-minded. But I want travellers to come to Morocco and fall in love with the country and come back, whether that's one of my customers on a tour or people travelling independently. I'm always happy to help people out.
Awesome. So where can we find you online?
You can find me pretty much anywhere connected to Morocco online. I'm probably in there somewhere. But my Overland tour company is Amazigh Overland. Our website is amazighoverland.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and you can also find me as a member or admin of the Morocco Overland groups, Overlanding West Africa, Overlanding North Africa, and all the rest of it, and probably a dozen or so more. As I say, I'm in most Morocco-based van life and overland groups, but the ones I run are Overland Morocco, West Africa Overland. They're my big admin duties.
Awesome. We'll include the links in the show notes below. I'm wishing you all the best for this year's tour season.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed, and
hopefully we'll run into you at some time during our travels.
I'm sure we will do. And Pizzas on the Piece, 19th of October, open to all.
Perfect.
Anybody can come. Your challenge is to find us, and that is the only challenge. It's a great fun event, and it's always good fun to meet the different people who come along and make the event a success.
Absolutely. We'll link that to the show notes below. You have so many links. Thank you so much again for coming and chatting all about Morocco, and thank you so much to the Overland Journal podcast listeners for tuning into this very long, in-depth, awesome episode about Morocco. Thank you so much for joining, and we will see you next time.